Davis and Mario Barrios. This is not the podcast for you. We are not going to talk about any of that. We are going to talk about club boxing. We are looking at the things that are just happening below the surface. There'll be some good, there'll be some bad, there'll be some ugly, there'll be some dangerous. There's going to be everything in between. So if you want to hear about a man being accused of murder for what he did in the ring, you are in the right spot. If this is not a journey that you're up for, no worries. There are plenty of boxing podcasts out there to listen to. They will talk about Tank. They will talk about Lomachenko. That's not what Tim Boxeo does. Tim Boxeo is a TC Boxing Hall of Famer. He is the most reliable guy out there for, I don't know, setting betting lines on club boxing shows. So, Tim, how was your weekend?
It was okay. It was all right. Angelo, it's good to talk to you again. So, it's funny. I look back at the weekend and there was so much boxing on. There was a ton of club boxing. Obviously, everyone knows at the high level, at least PBC, Showtime, DAZN was really busy. But for me, I like to consume as much as possible, obviously. That's why we're talking. And weekends like this past weekend just caused me a lot of stress overall. Plus, on top of that, I added in a few last-minute pay-per-view dollars. And just to consume Friday nights and Saturday night shows was upwards of like $300 in the club world. And that doesn't even include Showtime or DAZN. So those two facts, I'm doing okay. But club boxing on a weekend like that gets stressful for me. So I'm excited to wind it down and talk about some good stuff that happened over the weekend. It's like you said, this was as big as it gets.
This was the Super Bowl of club boxing. I mean, you thought it was Chris Lovejoy, but Chris Lovejoy didn't go viral.
Right. No, he didn't. It's funny about the funny thing about it, like you said about it, you say going viral, what does that mean, right? Like, I think you hit a couple of really big points, and some of the other places I noticed it, like it was on the front of the digital sports page for The Sun in the UK. I subscribed to a online business journal called Business Insider. It was on there. I mean, I couldn't believe it. The news about Saul was in every country on the front of their digital sports page across the world. And then on top of it, I put that clip up on TikTok, which my son got me into. I started using recently. In like 36 hours, I got 250,000 views, which in my world, my little world of club boxing is a lot. So yeah, this was a big deal.
That is perhaps more views than everything you've posted this year combined has gotten on Twitter.
Yeah, that's for sure. That app is pretty amazing with the amount of reach it has. But yeah, you're right. That's exactly true.
Okay, so my name's Angelo. I am the host. I'll be asking the questions here. So Tim, let's hear. I think everybody knows what is about to come next. But when I ask you, what's the story of the week? Please tell us about the fiasco in Bolivia, which has also been like a fiasco for this podcast because we've talked about this fight happening on like 4 different episodes and it didn't happen. Well, it finally happened. So maybe start us at the beginning.
Yeah, sure. So right off the top, let's tell you, just so you know the scope of what we're talking about. Let's tell you a couple of nuggets about the outcome of the fight. So Saul Farah, and we'll get into details about him and Pedro here in a minute. Saul Farah won in Pandino, Bolivia, with a DQ in the 6th round versus debutant debutant Pedro Tabares.
Pedro never fought before, is what he's trying to say.
That's right. Yeah, never fought before. Saturday in Pandino, Bolivia, which I just mentioned, but Pandino, after some research I find is literally in the jungle. It's right in the northwest corner of Bolivia in the Amazon. So this fight, like you said, has been a favorite of our podcast for some time now, because the fight between Saul and Pedro was supposed to happen pre-pandemic. And I'm gonna share some details about all the pushbacks and the controversy leading up to the fight, and then what's happened since the fight ended. There's a couple of really interesting nuggets that came out of the post-fight stuff. So by now, if you're listening to this show, maybe or maybe not, you've seen the video, like we had just mentioned, which has literally gone viral around the world. In Poland, I've seen it in. It was in online publication in Thailand. I've literally seen it everywhere. So to recap what happened in the ring, first and foremost, about the fight itself, this was an 8-round bout between Saul Farah, 73 wins, 26 losses, and 3 draws now, over debuting fighter Pedro Tabarez. And I went back and watched the fight in preparation for our show, and I got a little bit of a different take than I did on the actual fight than when I was watching it live on Facebook. When I was watching it live on Facebook, and this is the first video clip that I put out immediately when it happened, the camera was so far away, the fighters looked like ants, which isn't that unusual for me in terms of viewing Facebook Live. But unfortunately, the lights in the stadium also kind of bleached the guys out. So it was really difficult to tell what was happening. But then I found a really HD 1080p full fight replay. And I have that in the show notes if you want to go back and watch the full fight. It's only about 30 minutes long. And it's worth it. But on fight night, I thought Tabarez really dominated the king, El Gran Campeón, for most of the fight. But when I went back and watched it again, really not a whole lot happened in the first round. It'd be really, really difficult to pick a winner in the round. I mean, I hate 10-10 rounds, but that was as good a case for a 10-10 round as you could probably ever make, because hardly anyone landed a punch. It was that slow. And in the second round, Tabarez landed a couple of shots. He may have even won the third round. It was pretty close. But Saul definitely won the fourth and fifth rounds. So we had a pretty close fight going into the sixth round of this 8-round bout. And in the sixth round, Tabarez had some success in the early part of the round. He's a southpaw, and he lands a hard lead left that really buckles Farah's legs. And Angelo, I sent this clip, this really truncated clip to you that had been slowed down, because I thought that Saul got knocked on his ass. And in real time, and even on the HD 1080p replay, you could make that judgment. But when you slow it down and look at it, what really happened was he got cracked by that lead left, and it was a good, clean shot that he did not see coming. So his legs definitely buckled. But instead of going backwards, he actually took a step forward, and he was bending at the knee, so he kind of braced himself. And if Tabarez would have stayed put, it looked like they would have ended up in a clinch almost. But instead what happened, and for whatever reason, probably because Tabarez doesn't know what the hell he's doing in a boxing ring, is whenever he'd throw his lead hand, he'd follow with his other hand, but not with a punch, almost like your grandma when she's grabbing you in the face on either side of your face to give you a big kiss. So many times during the fight, Tabarez ended up with both of his hands along Saul's head like that. And in this, after he had landed that lead left, he grabs him pretty much with both of his hands, and then along on his head, on Saul's head, and essentially just, I don't want to say throws him, but kind of forearms him down to the canvas. And then in true WWE style, he immediately follows him straight to the canvas, fires a couple of shots trying to beat Farah while he's down. The referee quickly grabs him, pulls him up, and we're in an all-out street fight at this point. And the referee, when he gets Tabarez up and trying to pull him off of Saul, who's still down on the ground and obviously clearly concussed, the referee's trying to pull Tabares basically to the other side of the ring. And along the way, Tabares gets not one, not two, but 3 stomps in. The first one lands pretty clean. He misses the second one somewhat. And then he really lands that 3rd foot stomp along Saul's neck and side of his head. And at that point, Saul is scrambling to get himself back up to his feet while other people have rushed into the ring and grabbed onto Tabares and moved him away from Farah. And Angelo, I got to tell you, like, this is unlike anything I've seen in a boxing ring in a long time. I mean, a friend of mine sent me a clip from Australia where a full-out brawl breaks out like this in the ring, but it was like in the 80s. I mean, something of this caliber I don't remember seeing in a long, long time. Now, 2 questions have come up really as this clip went viral. And one is, what is the background of this? Clearly something led up to Tabares losing his cool. And then secondly, what's happened to the guy? And I've got some information on both those things to tell you. So first, the background. And if you're a loyal listener of the first 10 episodes, there may be some review in here for you. But Farah, of course, is the long-standing heavyweight champion of Bolivia for over 12 years. Farah generally is feasted on competition at home, and then he'd go on the road and take a mid-level to medium-level fight in terms of visibility, generally, and then lose. Not generally, he'd lose, and then come back home and scratch some more wins together. In October of 2020, Farah lost his Bolivian heavyweight title to someone named Marco Kenny, who was also making his pro debut and actually fought on the undercard of this event on Saturday. Now, Farah lost this fight by a 12-round split decision, and I watched it in October of last year on pay-per-view. I think there were 6 of us watching this. One judge, it went to a 12-round decision, as I just mentioned. And one of the judges had it for Marco Kenny in a score of 120 to 117. There's a score you don't hear every day. But I thought the listeners would enjoy that. If that tells you anything about what Bolivia wanted to happen in that fight between Farah and Kenny, for some reason, Marco Kenny has a lot of promotional dollars behind him. I'm not really sure what to make of all that, but it's clear that there's someone with money behind him as a fighter. Well, at this time, Farah was weighing between like 230 and 260. He's fought in his career as high as 3 bills. But the smart businessman that El Gran Campeon is, he pivoted at that time and decided, hey, there's an opportunity here for me at Bridgerweight. So he dropped down to 220, and in December of last year became the first ever Bridgerweight champion in the world when Bolivia created their Bridgerweight title, and Saul won via unanimous decision 12. So it was at that time, shortly after, that Tabares' name first started to surface prior to the start of the pandemic, that Farah might fight Pedro Tabares. And how or why, I don't really know. It looks like Marco Kenny and Pedro Tabares both come out of kind of the weightlifting gym scene in Bolivia. Looks like they both spend a lot of time together in that world. And Pedro Tabares was definitely in shape. The guy who was pretty ripped.
Yeah,
so
he looked good.
Yeah, he looked like a bodybuilder. The fight actually was contested at heavyweight between Farah and Tabares, and there were no weigh-in details, no weigh-in pictures. I found that really odd, but there were none. I've been communicating here a little bit with Saul here the past couple of days, but I haven't been getting many answers on the questions I've been asking, but he's been kind enough to at least text me back and let me know he's doing okay. So after the fights that I just mentioned, Farah and Tabares start planning for a fight on March 26th, which technically was their second attempt at this bout. It's a little gray on when the first one was, but it was sometime between about February to March 26th when the second one was set. So the fight was going to be in Beni, Bolivia, but the commission, and some listeners might remember this part, refused to sanction the fight beyond a 4 to 6 round bout. And that decision wasn't made until the morning of the fight. So they're getting ready to fight the evening of March 26th, which was a Friday. And a press conference is held in the morning. And the commission comes out and says, no, we can't sanction this more than 4 to 6 rounds. We need box rec support. They threw that detail in there. And during that press conference, we talked about this, I believe, on episode 3, if I'm not mistaken. It gets a little heated because Farah's got his Bridgerweight belt there. He's saying that he feels he's been disrespected. He's a longstanding champion, and he should have the ability to fight Tabares if he wants to. And at some point during that press conference, if you've seen the clip, Farah stands up and starts to make things interesting as he addresses Tabares directly, and then decides to hurl his Bridgerweight title belt at Pedro Tabares. And the little commission guy in between the two men does a very futile job of keeping them apart. And a full-out fist fight ensues. And these guys start throwing hands in a very real way. So the fight obviously isn't going to happen. 5 days later, Farah puts a different card together. He fights, gets a win. And then just a couple of weeks later, the fight's moved at the suggestion of Tabares over to Tabares' hometown in Pando, Bolivia. And it's rescheduled for April 30th. Then the fight is moved back again to May 7th, just a week, trying to get some details together. And then, for whatever reason, it's moved again, this time to the 28th of May. And at that time, we get so close that Farah actually flies to Pando, Bolivia. Obviously, Farah lives in Bolivia. Bolivia is not a big country, but the terrain is such that you're not going to hop in a car in Santa Cruz and drive up to Pando. So he actually arrives in Pando, Bolivia. Now, according to Farah, he lands in Pando on fight week, Sunday, Monday time. And when he hits the ground, he's got no contact. They don't give him a cell phone number. He can't get in touch with Tabares' team. And when he finally does get in touch with the team that's putting the fight on, they basically tell him, listen, there's no money to throw this event. There's no way we're going to be able to follow through. And Saul is a very proud champion. So he goes on the local news, and they do a live interview that lasts about 20 minutes. So streamed live on Facebook and obviously on local television while Farah is driving, about how he feels disrespected. He's fought all over the world, has never been disrespected like this before. And if they didn't have the money to throw the show, they could have just told they could have thrown the show in Santa Cruz, where Farah lives. And as a promoter himself, he could have promoted the show. So why didn't they just be up front with him and give him all that information? Now, Tabares receives all that, as you might imagine, is not in a very favorable way. Feels like he's been called out by Farah, that Tabares feels that Farah is speaking poorly upon the people of Pando and the people that he associates with. Nonetheless, the men, one way or another, agree to the fight June 19th, and it gets rescheduled for what is at least the 5th time, and that's when we had the incident in the ring that I just described. So that's kind of the buildup that got us to this point, Angelo. And then, like I mentioned, we saw what happened in the ring. And
Pedro tried to kill Saul, is what you're trying to tell me, that when they were in the ring, Pedro lands an okay shot. He blatantly pushed Saul Farah, the king of Bolivian Bridgerweight boxing, pushed him to the canvas, then proceeded to punch him while he was down and stomp on his head multiple times. This seems to me like Pedro is a very, very naughty person.
This is one of my favorite lines, Angelo. I know you're a NBA fan. and I'm an NBA fan, but it's true. What happened in the ring was not an NBA style fight.
No. That was
Pedro,
like WWE, but somebody did something wrong and the dude started actually throwing real shots in there.
Yeah. Pedro was trying to put Saul's head right through the canvas with those stomps. That was not. He was not playing around. And I always tell people I've had a couple of close friends that were longtime fighters, and I always tell people the difference between people like me and you and people like that are when the shit hits the fan, those guys, they don't have that switch to think, well, what could happen if I stomp on this guy's head, right? That stuff doesn't go through most of their minds. And it was clear that Tavares knows his way around a fight because that switch did not exist in his head either. As soon as he got pissed, he immediately went into stomp mode. So the fight ends in a DQ. They get the belt back around Saul's waist. God bless. And we have the reigning champion. Now, what's happened after the fight? There's some good information on that too. So both men actually did an immediate post-fight interview. Tavares had a really interesting one. Tavares was quoted after the fight as saying he offered the people of Pando and his family 1,000 apologies because he got mad. It was a really good fight. He had already knocked Farah out, but that Farah had been insulting the Pandinos, and he had already knocked Farah out. And the only reason he lost the title was because he started kicking Farah in the head. But the reason he started kicking the Farah in the head was that it was a special request that the Pandino people made of him. And it all out of the love for his department. So Pandino actually is called a department within Bolivia, for whatever that's worth. But he said he did it for the Pandino people out of special request. Now, I thought that was spectacular. Farah, they catch him post-fight undressing underneath some concrete stairs. And
of course.
Yeah, exactly what you would expect it to look like. And Saul claimed that he was indeed hit by a clean shot, but it wasn't the shot that put him down. It was a forearm that Tavares followed through with to both the head and neck that was actually the KO blow. Now, when I watched that immediately that night, I thought Farah was full of shit, right? Until I saw the slowed down clip that I'll link in the show notes. And I thought, the champ's got something here. Unfortunately, Farah's nose was broke. It's unclear whether it was the punch or any of the follow-through melee in the ring afterwards that broke Farah's nose. This fight was on Saturday. On Sunday, I did text El Gran Campeon and ask him if he's doing okay and how his nose was. And he said, by the grace of God, he's doing fine and he's healthy and feeling okay. Now, Farah goes on to say in this post-fight interview that, listen, I'll fight Tavares anytime. I'll fight him next week. I'll fight him next year. I'll fight him here in his hometown again. We can fight in China, he even says. Anywhere in between. And Farah says, if I lose, I'll retire from boxing. So the gauntlet's been laid down. Now, a media report out of Pando says that Farah earned $7,000 for the fight, which was, by the way, contested in front of 7,000 fans. Pretty darn good in the middle of the jungle.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of people for any club show, much less in the jungle. But Farah does go on to say, and this is kind of the final part of his interview, that, listen, they're going to have to pay me double next time and pay me what I'm worth as the champion because I've defended my title 2 times now as the Bridgerweight king, which is kind of confusing because this fight, again, was contested at heavyweight. But then he also claimed to be the interim heavyweight champion, although Marco Kenny defended his heavyweight title on the same undercard, so I'm not sure. We might have a little WBA situation going on there. So I don't know what all that says. So a couple of more interesting nuggets that come out of this whole thing. The same report out of Pando that stated Farah's purse as well as the number of fans. And on the HD video, you can see the place is pretty full, which quite frankly leads me to believe that Tabares isn't going, if Tabares can put that many people in the seats in his hometown, and I'm sure the buildup with Farah had a lot to do with it, but if he could put that many people in the seats, I would fall out of my chair if they follow through and suspend this guy for a significant time frame. But we'll see how that plays out. No decision has been made as of yet. I asked Saul today, and he did not answer on whether Tabares has been suspended. He answered me in text message, but he didn't answer my specific question, which leads me to believe, I hate to assume, but if he would have been suspended, he likely would have told me. So that story mentions one final point that I thought was not really shocking, but definitely newsworthy, is that Farah told them that he reportedly planned on filing for attempted murder in the courts of Pandino on Monday. Yep. Because what Tabares said, not only what he did, obviously, but what he said in the ring after that, he was following through on a special request of the Pandino people to stomp on Saul any way he could. Last bit of information on the fight. I did watch a press conference on Monday Tabares held in his hometown, and he was actually very contrite in the press conference. He said he apologized for his conduct, and I quote, these are some direct quotes from him to wrap up our story for the week. Tabares said, listen, everyone saw what I did and that it's wrong. The video itself is self-explanatory. He said, I will work on my temperament so it doesn't happen again. He said, I'm not good at talking. All the evidence against me is in the video. But my blood was raging. But I still should have controlled myself. And he did go on to say, I apologize to Saul Farah. What I did, I would not like for someone to do to me. I apologize to Saul Farah's family and to the kids that look up to me. He said, this was not how I should have acted, and I'm not proud of what I did. I'm willing to take any sanctions because I've recognized my error. He said, listen, this type of activity happens in football all the time, meaning soccer. He said, but I'm not making excuses. That is no excuse for the way I acted. And finally, he said, basically, in so many words, this is the whole reason why I'm here, to show my face in front of my family, in front of my town, and on camera to the champion Saul Farah, is because I apologize for my actions. So that's as much information as is available anywhere in Bolivia here at the time. And boy, it was one hell of a ride through the weekend.
See, the thing for me is that I see these people who are coming to the story and they have no clue what the context of the events that they saw on Saturday night. And it's pretty funny to see the comments on Reddit where people were just outraged by this clip, and everyone was in agreement that Pedro should be never allowed to fight again and all this stuff. And granted, what he did was fairly despicable. But at the same time, as somebody who's followed this story, and I don't know what exactly we would describe your relationship with Saul is, but as somebody who is connected, but I don't actually talk to him, I feel like Saul kind of has this coming, throwing the title at him in a press conference, challenging a guy who's never fought before, just has this air of being personal to me. And in a fight where things get personal, I'm not nothing shocks me with what happened here.
That's a fair conclusion. In the last 4 months, in the fight that was canceled when Farah was in Pandino, that we just talked about, to your point that you mentioned about the press conference, in both of those cases, there was times where Farah stood up and made it a confrontation, made it very clear what his resume is, where he's been, how long he's fought, how long he's been champion. And so, yeah, I mean, when you start to talk to a man in a certain way, it doesn't justify the actions, but you can certainly take a step back and look and understand how it may make someone boil over in the wrong instance, like what happened on Saturday night.
I guess the short way to say it is there were probably no innocent parties in this little confrontation. And I highly doubt that this is the end of the story.
No, there's going to be another chapter of this. I'd be very surprised, because the opportunities for Saul to fight in big fights in Bolivia are few and far between at this point. So I'd be really surprised if these guys don't fight again within the next 12 months. If they could very well fight again here the next time Saul fights. But it sure seems like they'll fight again here within the next 12 months.
And none of them will be on BoxRec.
No, not at least for quite some time.
All right, well, that brings a conclusion to the Saul Farah saga, at least for now. So, were there any fights from this past weekend that delivered in a, not sort of a spectacle, but like they were actually just good contests between two fighters, hopefully with one not making their pro debut?
There were a bunch of them. There were a bunch of good fights. One of them that we previewed last week on the podcast, and one I was really excited for. It didn't really deliver on the excitement level within the ring because of the matchup, which is the way I previewed it. It actually delivered in a different way, and let's talk about it. So we talked about former IBO world champion Tulani Mbenge, who's now 18-1 with 14 knockouts. And he won via TKO 3 over previously undefeated Jubilani McKenzie, who took his first loss, now 11-1. He takes McKenzie's WBA Pan-African belt welterweight title. And it was Saturday in Gauteng. I say Gauteng, but the locals say Gauteng, South Africa. And we previewed it because for the local South African scene, it was really billed as the South African Spence versus Crawford. Two young guys, one of them undefeated, one with only the one loss, and Mbenge losing Sebastian Formella in a very contested bout in Germany in 2019. So it was really a super fight at the welterweight level between two young lions, solid amateur pedigrees for both guys. I know the South Africans felt McKenzie potentially had a really high ceiling and continue on with world title aspirations. And Mbenge, just a really stiff puncher, which is always going to keep him in good fights. I know the Formella fight on the surface doesn't bode well. The loss to Formella doesn't bode well for Mbenge when you look at his resume. But Mbenge has opportunities here moving forward after this win. There's no doubt about it. So the way this fight played out in the ring, Mbenge being the really hard puncher and McKenzie being a little bit more of the slick boxer. So in the ring on Saturday, it didn't really play out as a fight of the year candidate. It didn't really play out as a 12-round super fight that we would expect Spence and Crawford to be if we ever saw it. Instead, what happened was Mbenge really from the jump looked like he was the superior fighter. I mean, he was the clean, hard, crisp puncher. He really putting his punches together. And when he did, it was getting McKenzie's attention really from very early on, halfway through the first round and only a 3-round fight. Now, McKenzie looked a little bit longer than Mbenge. I don't have the stats in front of me, but his fight plan looked to fit with the way he looked, too, in that he was trying to establish a jab, trying to keep himself at a distance while Mbenge was trying to close the distance. So it was one of those types of fights, but McKenzie wasn't really too effective. And really by the second round, Mbenge was doing just walking McKenzie down, getting in close, and really letting his hands go. Early in the third round, Mbenge caught McKenzie with a left hook that staggered him. Now, it didn't stagger him to the point where he fell back into the ropes or Mbenge was about to jump on him and kind of finish things early in that third. But you could tell that McKenzie felt that, and he really kind of went into a prevent or a shell at that point and completely stopped trying to throw his jab at all. So the round kind of continues, and the end comes when probably the last 30 seconds of the round, I don't have the finishing time in front of me, but Mbenge again catches McKenzie with a left, follows it up with a flurry, and we're along the ropes now, and McKenzie's back against the ropes. He turns to his side and almost faces the ring post. And at this point, he's almost bent at 90 degrees, a little less than 90 degrees. And then Mbenge lands another shot with McKenzie turned away like that, and his hands kind of fall to their side. And I saw some people on Twitter wishing, the ref would have given a count or something to that effect, but instead the ref jumps in and calls a halt to the fight. And it's a touchy situation, right? I mean, there's no standing 8 count in effect. McKenzie hasn't hit the deck, but he's turning away. His head's down facing the canvas. He's not defending himself. And you've got a big, heavy-handed puncher letting his hands go. And there was no complaints from McKenzie as the fight was stopped. And Mbenge, rightfully so, celebrated massively with a huge TKO 3W in what was a really, really big win for him on the local scene. I've got the clip to the knockout there if you'd like to see it in the show notes. So take a look. So that was a really fun fight to watch.
Okay, and then there's another one that I saw a lot of discussion for that, in terms of club fights, even by that standard, I thought this was excessive amount of coverage for this. And that was in Australia.
Oh, did you? Did you think it was too much coverage for this level of fight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe you'll prove me wrong.
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons for it. I'm not the expert. I learned this during the fight, so I'll share with you all what I learned. And I've got a couple of Australian friends that
might
have
be
been
mad
really
at me
good.
Now.
No. I don't think so at all. They've been really good in sharing information about the local scene for me, so I can help put my puzzle together to understand what's happening. But yeah, to your point, 22-year-old Australian heavyweight Justis JPH Huni is now 5-0 with 4 knockouts as he scores a 10th round TKO victory over Paul Gallen, who falls to 11-1-1. And Gallen is famous in Australia for NRL Rugby League. And after this fight, famous to me for not being human, as I'll tell you about here in a second. No human being on the face of the earth can possibly take the level of beating that Gallen took in this fight and walk away from the ring. It was disgusting, quite frankly. But Huni defends his Australian heavyweight title, and this fight was in Sydney. This was such a big fight, and I believe, did a preview of Huni's last fight prior to Gallen on one of our pods a couple of episodes ago versus someone named Christian Soy, and that was May 26th.
Not to be confused with Christian Hosoi, who is a, 50-something-year-old professional skateboarder whose name I will never forget after watching a documentary on his life.
I've never heard of that guy before.
Yeah, he was like a skateboarder in the 80s whose life quickly fell apart with the combination of financial and drug issues.
Gotcha. I was more of a BMX guy than in the 80s and 80s. So yeah, not so much skateboard. So Christian Soy. So the point I was making on that one about Christian Soy was This fight between Huni and Gallen was so big that when Huni and Soy went in to weigh in that day, all of the signage in the arena for the weigh-in between Huni and Soy was advertisements for Huni and Gallen, which was coming up a month later, which obviously just happened this past Wednesday. So that's how big this event was. And Huni has been really at the top of the boxing information food chain in Australia because he fought a 10-round fight in his pro debut, and he fought for the Australian heavyweight title against a pretty decent opponent and scored a 7th-round TKO, and he became the Australian heavyweight champion in his pro debut. And even at that point, he had spoke about his desire to fight in the Olympics. And this was indeed his last fight before he moves on now as a representative of Australia and one of the favorites for the gold medal in the heavyweight division. On the Gallen side, my friends have educated me that there's been a ton of buzz around him. And I watched his pay-per-view here, not even 60 days ago, as he faced, and I'm doing air quotes now, former world champion Lucas Brown. If I'm not mistaken, Lucas is about 44 years old. But Gallen steamrolls Lucas Brown in about 90 seconds. It just destroys him prior to his fight with Huni. And that created a lot of buzz. But Gallen was a superstar in the rugby league in Australia, as high a profile of athlete as you have in that country. And then made his transition into heavyweight boxing, was undefeated. And then Lucas Brown is a bit of a national treasure, at least from what he has accomplished in the ring. And so Gallen steamrolling him like that really provided a lot of build-up to this fight. So the general line of thought from the Gallen supporters was that their man, was made of iron, and I confirm that, yes, this man is not made of skin and bones like all the rest of us. But that combined with his steamrolling of Lucas Brown and Justis Huni's potentially suspect chin that led to him being KO'd in sparring late last year in a video that went pretty viral on all of the underbelly of social media amongst boxing degenerates, would lead to Gallen staying around long enough to land a few bombs, really, and put an end to what his supporters felt like was this charade of Justis Huni being a professional boxer, because they felt like he really fights more in an amateur style and continues to do so now through five pro fights. Well, it didn't play out that way, because instead what happened was Huni displayed, in my eyes, after watching the fight, really some significant heavyweight tools. The guy moves around really, really well for a big man, puts combinations together really well, doesn't go to the body quite as much. And Jeff Fennick mentioned that quite a bit, actually, on the broadcast. And as a side note, Jeff Fennick is a fantastic color commentator. Wish I could listen to him every single time I listen to or watch boxing matches. He calls it the way he sees it, and just uniquely qualified in what he sees and what he shares is fascinating to me. But the first half of the fight, Huni's doing that, outboxing Gallen. Actually, I think it was the 4th or 5th round. In between rounds, you can hear Huni telling his corner that, gosh, my arms feel really heavy. And I was at that point, I think all the Gallen supporters this is exactly what we need. Gallen has survived the first part of the fight. Huni can't knock him out. And so now Paul can just land one of those overhand right haymakers and knock Huni out. And Gallen did land some overhand right haymakers. He landed them early, he landed them mid, and he landed late in the fight. And from my eyes, Huni just walked through him. I mean, I didn't see any of those big shots that landed on Huni get his attention. He tied Gallen up a couple of times, as he should, when a couple of those big shots hit. But at no point was he hurt or staggered. And I think I tweeted out a couple times I was watching this live. I just became in awe, not of the physical toughness that Gallon was displaying in this fight, because he was eating monstrous shots from Huni in combination from both hands. I mean, Huni was beating the living shit out of him come middle of the fight. And it wasn't so much the mental, or excuse me, the physical, it was the mental. I just couldn't believe how Gallon could continue to walk forward. I mean, once I got past the shock that he was staying on his feet, I couldn't get past the fact that he just continued to fight. How does a person get to that point mentally where he just kept fighting? I couldn't get my head around it. And the other thing I couldn't get my head around in this fight, and it's something that really pisses me off when I watch boxing, and it pissed me off more than anything when I was watching this one, is I just don't understand when we have someone like Paul Gallon, who everyone, including his corner, knows that he's just not human. I mean, he's one of the toughest son of a bitches you'll ever see. I just don't understand in boxing why guys like that, we constantly have to have them prove that to us each time they go into the ring. Like, I don't understand why Gallon's corner was trying to push him to finish 10 rounds. I don't know what he was trying to prove. And if there was a doctor in the side of the ring, he was sleeping, because this fight should have been stopped at the 7th round. It was gross.
Speaking of doctors sleeping ringside, there was also in the Farah fight, the judge who was not paying attention at all to the fight. It was like babysitting their kids or something.
I went to take a sip of water and then it just shot out of my mouth when you said that. So if you go back and watch the HD version, all you'd have to do is go back and watch the first round. And as Angelo says, the judge that is the only judge you can see on ringside, he definitely has at least one of his kids sitting ringside. And he is not watching the fight in the first round. I didn't care enough to watch if he was paying attention to the rest of the rounds. I just wanted to watch the fight. But he was looking everywhere but the ring. But he sure as hell wrote something down on his notepad after that first round. Anyway. So anyway, that's how that fight played out, Huni and Gallon. Huni actually knocks Gallon out brutally in the 10th round and gets a TKO 10 victory. There was one more point I wanted to make that was equally shocking to me, is you can't play the story both ways, right? What was amazing to me was that the main takeaway in this fight, as when I went to Fox Sports Australia and read the headline of the fight later that morning, was that Huni would really be he's really stuck in amateur mode, and he will have no upside as a pro because he just doesn't have the power, was the main takeaway of the story. And I got to tell you, when your guy is made out of iron, and he is, and Huni walks through his shots and eventually brutally knocks him out in the 10th round, to me, that doesn't coincide with the way they ran with the lead on Fox Sports Australia as a takeaway from that fight. But I'm a Huni fan, so what the hell do I know? I'm probably looking at it from my own rose-colored glasses. Huni's off to Tokyo, and for me, and I'm interested to hear what you're going to say, Angelo, I have a hunch on what you're going to say, because we traded just one or two words on this. But for me, if I'm managing a top 20 heavyweight right now, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about the top 10. I'm talking like 11 through 25, let's say. I would not run to get in the line with Justis Huni. Like, I would at least pause if I'm managing one of those guys. It's not a snap decision. Yeah, let's go fight Justis Huni. We're going to knock this dude out. He's just too big. He's too talented. He moves too well. It's a really dangerous fight for any heavyweight outside the top 10, in my mind. What do you think?
Absolutely not. I don't see it with Justis Huni, and he's probably listening to this and all of his family. But there's a lot of work to be done, and beating up Paul Gallon, or Gallon, however you say his name, is not indication that we're ready to fight anyone from 11 to 25. I think there are instincts fighters have that even a guy at rated 25 is thinking in boxing at a speed that guys coming up just aren't ready for. And the heavyweight division is unforgiving. It is not the place to, well, let's see. It's not a place where it's like, well, we know we can outbox him. The question is, could we stop him? That's not the division to do that in. So I think Huni's got some work to do. When you say he's going to Tokyo, I assume you mean he's going to fight in the Olympics. That's going to be interesting because I believe that will reinforce the amateur style that people talk about him having as a detriment for his future. So it would be nice to see that if he goes to the Olympics, can he slip into the style that you need to win a gold medal and then come back out and be back to a dangerous heavyweight who throws with shots that are devastating? That would be nice. But I'm not too optimistic on that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think the way you said what I just said wasn't. So you flipped what I just said around. So I agree with what you just said. I don't think Huni is ready for 25 through 11. Like if I were managing Huni, I wouldn't be trying to make a fight with someone from 25 through 11 in the next 5 fights, not by any stretch. I'm saying if I were managing number 20, I wouldn't, and I got the phone call managing that guy, I'm not going to rush to Australia to fight Huni when I'm trying to build my own guy up. But I understand your point. I mean, I think he's got some work to do. He was asked in the ring after the fight about the amateur style as a criticism, and he flat out answered it and said, listen, maybe that's because I fought 5 pro fights knowing that I'm going to go to Tokyo and represent Australia. And when I come back from that, I will have to work with my team to change my style. And I thought that was a pretty open-minded and fair and very mature thing for the young man to say. I just think he's got a ton of upside, man. I'm gonna keep watching him.
I think definitely that is the right thing to say. I mean, if anybody's ever going to accuse you for having an amateur style and your response to that is, yeah, but I'm going to the Olympics, I think that's like match point right there. There's nothing else to say. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. There's a reason why you're fighting like this. It's because your goal, it will help you meet your goal if you fight the way that you've been fighting.
Absolutely. Shout out to my friend Ben Damon, who does color commentary on Fox Sport or Blow by Blow on Fox Sports Australia, in the ring asking Justis that question. I'm sure that was not a very comfortable question to ask the champ there in the ring after the fight. So I'm glad he did. Yep.
Do you have an update on Yuri Foreman?
How did you know that? Yeah, it's funny. I put that down in the notes, and I was a Yuri Foreman fan in the early 2000s. I always liked Yuri Foreman. Not a massive fan of his style, a little too much amateur style, still kind of stuck in his boxing. But I really like Yuri Foreman as a man. I think he's a solid human being from what I've learned, and always tried to root for him. Anyway, second comebacking fight, if I'm not mistaken, and it was supposed to happen about a month earlier. Foreman retired in 2017 finally after a beatdown from Erislandy Lara, and made a comeback fight in 2020, right at the end of the year, and then rolled into the new year and was going to fight Jimmy Williams. Got pushed back a month, ended up fighting Jimmy Williams, who's now 18-5-2. And Jimmy Williams scores a majority decision 8 victory on Saturday in Atlanta over Yuri Foreman, who falls to 35-4. Apparently Williams dropped Foreman twice in the 6th round and still walked away with a majority decision. Scores were 77-73 times 2, and then one judge had it 75-75. I didn't watch that fight. There was just way too much pay-per-view on. In hindsight, I wish I did, but I missed that one. So that happened. Give you a couple other quick nuggets here before we move on in the next segment of our show. But I did watch a pay-per-view out of Davenport, Iowa, over on the Iowa-Illinois border, Quad Cities. And it was a fantastic pay-per-view. It cost me $20, but it was 1080p, right on the ring, multiple cameras, crystal clear. It was great. It was exactly what I want from club pay-per-view. Had graphics. Really was a good-looking show. There was a nice prospect on there from Iowa. He's now moved up to Minnesota, super middleweight. He's got a pretty extensive amateur background, Golden Gloves. And his name is Tony Woods. Antonio, I believe, is how he's listed on BoxRec. I've got his profile here for you. But he won a TKO 2 over someone named David Mason, who falls to 3-7. And Woods improves to 7-0 with 6 knockouts. The problem Tony's going to have is an upper Midwest guy. And this is kind of where I grew up in the club boxing scene, so I'm very, very familiar with it, is the level of opposition up in the upper Midwest just, isn't great. So Tony's got a lot of good skills in the eye test. Hopefully he'll continue to develop with the right level of competition. It may, need him to move outside, not physically move, but fight on the road to get some better development than maybe that's available to him, or they're going to have to bring some guys in because that area of the country is just not very well known for good boxing. So that happened. And then last but not least, I was looking forward to this fight. Heavyweight Hussein Muhammad moves to 17-0 with 13 knockouts, scoring 2 knockdowns on his way to a clear unanimous decision 10 victory over Sanad Gashi, who falls to 21-4. And Muhammad claims the vacant WBC International Silver heavyweight title. This fight was Saturday in Hamburg, Germany. Muhammad had for a small crowd, a small venue with a small crowd, he had a very vocal group of supporters there on his side. And Gashi, the Gashin gun, of course, is known being a man that looks, it's a fucking awesome nickname, a man that looks like he's chiseled out of stone, but he also, of his 21 wins, he does have 21 knockouts. Pretty big puncher, but has lost every time he's stepped up. And he just looked flat out gassed at about the 7th round. And pretty big win for Muhammad, moving to 17-0. So that's what kind of rounded it out for me, at least as far as what I watched. I guess that's an alibi I want to mention is, listen, man, I'm just a boxing fan, right? Like, there's people that on the internet, on Twitter, on Reddit, maybe that try to provide results to all the fights. And that's maybe where it seems like that's what my Twitter account's about sometimes. I just tweet about, and I'm going to talk about on our podcast, the stuff that I wanted to watch and that I watched. So there's a lot of other stuff going on, but that's the stuff that I watched and I took note of that I wanted to share with you. So.
All right. So those were the fights. Was there, did you see anyone that's like ready to graduate beyond the club level?
Yeah, there's one really, really good fighter I wanted to mention to you. And my analysis and or detail of him will be a little slim. This is only the second time I've seen him. But my friend Zach in Australia, one of a handful of friends that I've come to befriend through our mutual boxing addiction. And shout out to Zach. He runs a podcast called the Unofficial Scorecard Podcast. You should check out if you haven't. Does a really nice job. He messaged me on Fight Week and said, hey, keep an eye for 22-year-old Australian super bantamweight Sam Goodman. I said, cool. So I was very, very impressed with Sam Goodman. He won his fight over a guy we talked about in the past in this podcast named Nort Beauchamp from New Zealand. Nort falls to 18-5. Goodman improves to 9-0 with 5 knockouts with a TKO victory in round number 6. And I've talked about Nort in the past out of New Zealand, because Nort is another man who clearly boxing is the wrong sport for him. He is just too tough for boxing. And that guy he needs to go try to run through concrete walls, see if people will pay him for it or something, because he's an animal. And Goodman, I couldn't have been more impressed with Goodman. I mean, on the eye test, as someone who's never spent a minute training or coaching a fighter in the boxing ring, Goodman, through my eyes, does almost everything that you would want to see a young 22-year-old fighter do. I mean, he's got really fast hands. He's got really fast feet, moves in and out really well. I describe his style as really kind of a slick boxer, puncher, just an overall very pleasing fighter to watch. It's one of those guys that you just really enjoy watching because you appreciate what he can do in the ring. And Goodman does that, but he also goes in for the kill too. So he's not a guy that, is going to be playing with his food that's going to bore you for 10 rounds. I've got a link here in the show notes of one of his fights from 2019, and you can kind of get a flavor of what I'm talking about. And he's really, I think, has a lot of potential, and I added him to my BoxRec watch list. I'm really excited to see his next fight. Australia, they've got it cooking down there, man. They've had a really good 2021.
I think boxing in general is having a really 2021. The summer schedule we got on the mainstream, which obviously we don't talk about here, but that mainstream schedule for the summer is looking very, very nice.
Things kind of, just generally speaking, it's hard to paint with a broad brush on anything, but summertime things usually kind of calm down.
Right.
In boxing, and we're not seeing that at all, huh?
Usually the highlight of the summer is an outdoor show at the StubHub Center where someone is going to be hanging on by a thread of their life after the fight.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Those days are over.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, do you have somebody for me that is going to shock us that this guy is still fighting?
I thought there would have been more available to us this week, and the one I prepared for, this hasn't really happened to me on my preparation on the podcast, but I'm sure you can tell me as a long-time podcast person yourself, and plenty of people listening can probably sympathize as well, that you'll prepare for something, and then I'm sure you've even put out podcasts, right, where you've previewed a whole fights or cards, and then the whole thing gets scrapped.
Oh yeah,
right?
We've wasted a lot of time doing that.
Yeah, well, I've wasted a lot of time digging into 44-year-old Ghanaian former world champ Joseph King Kong Ekbeko, who was supposed to fight Friday in the United Kingdom. But you made a good point to me when you told me earlier today that he had been scrapped off the card, because I didn't even notice that. And you said, hey, listen, he was going to fight Paul Butler. We might as well just talk about Paul Butler. And then as soon as you said that, I clicked on the link and I looked at Paul Butler's only 32 years old. How is that even possible? I feel like Paul Butler's been around since Ekbeko made his pro debut in 1998. I swear Butler was around 2004, but I can't believe it's 2010. Looks like it was his pro debut.
I think he fought a lot of old guys. I think is probably he gets associated with that. And I also think if you actually shit your pants in the ring, it adds 10 years to your career.
That's something that fell through the cracks of my boxing knowledge. So he shit his pants in the ring. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he shit his pants in the ring. Well, I mean, there was a brownish poop-like substance liquid coming from his backside. Got it.
You just called the shit poop, by the way.
Poop? You can use both.
Sorry.
There was something resembling a viscous shit-like substance on his pants.
Oh my God. I just remember Paul Butler from being a really busy little guy who, in those early years of 2010 to 2015, I actually liked to watch him fight. because how active he was as a puncher. But I don't think you share the same affinity for Paul Butler that I do.
No, I remember Zolani Tete, which, I mean, talk about a guy who was smoke and mirrors. Zolani Tete knocking him out in devastating fashion. I do remember that.
Fair enough. Well, if you don't mind me pivoting out of a Paul Butler shitting his pants discussion,
Sure.
I actually wanted to, and we didn't talk about this, but one of the things I think would be worthwhile to fit into this section of our show, if we've got time to do it, is just a tip of the cap to the journeyman in this section as well. Because in my mind, when I talk about someone who, oh my God, is he still fighting? Like we've talked about, like Cosme Rivera and, potentially Joseph King Kong Abeko, who amazingly never really stopped fighting at 44 years old. He's really fought almost every single year since he went pro in 1998. I wanted to do kind of just a tip of the cap to some of these journeymen too, if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So the best place to find these journeymen, of course, is in my beloved United Kingdom. And on Friday, we've got, and we're not going to dig deep into these guys, but let's just mention them. Friday, we've got 2 shows in the UK. One on Fight Zone, which we've talked about a lot on the show, from the car park in Sheffield. And then another is an MTA Global show in Bolton. And there's 4 guys here that deserve our admiration. A couple of them, 2 of them we've talked about already. The first one, starting at the bottom of the notes I wrote, Angelo, is Brett Fido. Brett the Threat, who we talked about, surprising a young prospect in his last outing, is right back at it. Brett has a record of 14 wins, 65 losses, and 5 draws. Out of those 65 losses, he's only been knocked out twice. And he's a 30-year-old super bantamweight. Shout out to Brett Fido. We can see him in action on Friday. And that guy comes to win, even though he's got 65 losses. The other one that we talked about 4 or 5 episodes ago is quickly becoming one of my favorite journeymen active. And his name is Naeem Ali. He has a record of 2 wins, 68 losses, and 1 draw. He's never been knocked out. And he's only 25 years old and turned pro in 2017. And he's a welterweight. I love this guy. And as much as odds are available for some of these lower level UK shows, I think I'm going to make a bold statement on this podcast right now that I am going to bet at least $1 on Naeem Ali every time he fights from this time going forward, because my man's going to get a victory here soon.
You think after 68 losses he's due?
Well, listen, man, as we've talked about plenty of times, no one's bringing in Naeem to win, right?
You sound like a second baseman for the Cubs in August.
And let's see. Naeem fought June 5th, so he's back in action just in 3 weeks. Fought April 30th. This guy's my favorite. And then 2 more quick ones. 27-year-old Chris Attaway, 10 wins, 70 losses, and 4 draws. Only 8 by stoppage. He's also a welterweight. And then, last but not least, 29-year-old MJ Hall, 2 wins, 60 losses, and 2 draws. Only 5 of those 60 losses by KO. He is also a welterweight. So we have some of the best journeymen in the UK, all in that welterweight division. I think you mentioned on a show or so ago. If we could only somehow, we should do a crowdsourcing campaign of our listeners and our followers on Twitter and all the other social spheres, and try to get a tournament set up with these guys, and we could throw it ourselves.
I've had ideas like this before, but not guys who professionally lose, but guys that are like incidental losers frequently.
It'd be fantastic. So shout out to the journeyman.
Okay. What else do we have coming up next? So we have the journeyman, but is there anything else that we should be paying attention for this coming week? Oh, I see you put on the top here, canceled.
Tons of stuff this week. Now, yep, the first thing I wanted to talk about when I went to look for any new information, since it is fight week, I found out that this guy had to pull out of this fight because he was hospitalized for upper respiratory tract infection. Apparently not COVID, but I got to tell you, this dude is so damn interesting that I just wanted to keep this in the show notes and share this with everyone, because I think if you love boxing and you love combat sports in general, you'll love this guy. So on Friday, there's a show in Russia, and it was supposed to be the pro debut for a Russian heavyweight. And his name is Godzi Navruzov. His nickname is Assault Rifle, which is fucking awesome. And he was supposed to fight a name that probably everyone listening to our show will have heard of, a Brazilian heavyweight, 41 years old, named Fabio Maldonado, who is 26-4 with 25 knockouts. And Assault Rifle was gonna make his pro debut against Maldonado. Well, you might have heard of Maldonado is because he has a pretty extensive heavyweight background in the last 4 years or so. He lost all 4 of the fights, but he went 26-0. And then starting in 2018, I believe, he went on a 4-fight losing streak to Oscar Rivas, Alexander Teslenko, Michael Hunter, and Carlos Takam. And went the distance with 3 out of the 4 of them, only being stopped by Hunter. But it's really Godzi Assault Rifle I wanted to tell you about. This guy is pretty fascinating. He's 32 years old, lives in Russia. He was a former professional soccer player in Russia, and then he decided to switch over to Muay Thai and kickboxing. In 2018, he wins a Muay Thai World Championship and is given a special pink belt by the King of Thailand, which is pretty damn cool. And then I keep digging even further, and I find out Assault Rifle is 5-0 as a bare knuckle fighter in Russia. And I run across something called Top Dog Fighting Championship. And shout out to Corey Erdman, who says, as I bounce this off him, he says, "Yep, I've watched Top Dog Fighting Championship." Corey's a degenerate. He's watched damn near everything. God bless him. We got to have Corey on the show here really, really soon. But Assault Rifle fights in this promotion called Top Dog. And this bare knuckle promotion is run in a circular ring that, instead of a cage or a ring post, is made a circle by hay bales. And all the fans are on the other side of the hay bales. And the fighters fight shirtless in their blue jeans and tennis shoes. Which, if that doesn't add to the aura of Assault Rifle, I don't know what does. But then I've got 2 links to his fights here. One of them is given status of Top Dog Knockout of the Year, and it's spectacular. And then another one is given status of Top Dog Fighting Championship fight, Hall of Fame fight of the year, and Hall of Fame worthy fight. And for a bare knuckle guy, Assault Rifle looks like a pretty damn good fighter. Moving his head a lot. He's kind of ducking, bobbing, and weaving as a heavyweight. And clearly this guy has some sick power in his hands. And hopefully we'll see him back in the ring. He did mention on his Instagram that he was really sad that he wasn't able to make his pro boxing debut, but he will be in the pro boxing ring very soon. So keep an eye out for this Assault Rifle coming to a ring near you. And when he gets ready to, certainly Angelo B. and you will be talking about him, that's for sure.
Well, with the nickname like Assault Rifle, I also think I've seen him in a poster before. I'm fairly sure. But yeah. What else do we have? I see something. This can't possibly be what I think it is.
I don't know what you think it is, but there's another event. There's one Friday in Russia, and then there's another one Saturday in Russia, and then, believe it or not, there's another one Sunday in Russia. But let's talk about the main event in Russia on Saturday. And hardcore boxing fans can attest that one of the better promotions out of Russia is a promotion called RCC Boxing Promotion. They do MMA as well, but they typically have a pretty nice stable of prospects and put on really pretty entertaining shows that go live on YouTube. And on Saturday morning, starting early, I want to say 7:30 a.m. Eastern time in the U.S. It might be 8:30. But you can check the Stanza live streaming schedule in my profile link and verify the time. The main event is 25-year-old Russian Mark Canelo Urvanov, 18-1 with 10 knockouts, facing a Venezuelan who I know I've seen, but his fights don't really stick in my head. His name is Angel Rodriguez. He's 19-1 with 10 knockouts. And like I said, it'll be live on YouTube. Urvanov has stubbed his toe a few times as just evidence of his record, 18-2-1. But he's been on a pretty damn good run here the last 3 or 4 fights. In 2019, I've got a link here for you. He had a 2020, he had a Club KO of the Year nominee from me, in which he really, just slept, dude. That's a fun knockout to watch, but you can see in that knockout, just how raw he is and really how technically flawed he is, because he's swinging hooks with both hands that look like he's trying to throw hay bales or something. And not a perfect technician, but he's aggressive. He can really punch and likes to try to sit down on his punches. And just a fun fighter to watch. So, and the fact that he's got red hair and he's Russian and he calls himself Canelo, I just like the guy. It'll be a really good main event. It's live and free on YouTube. Their YouTube streams are top quality, like 1080p, really, really good streams to watch. So if you've got some time Saturday morning, that'll be a fun fight to watch. Why were you surprised that I was going to talk about that?
Why is his nickname Canelo?
Because he's got red hair.
And so that's just what we call redheaded dudes in boxing now? They're just Canelo?
They're Canelo.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's the extent of our thought process and originality here.
Also, his name is Mark.
Well, yeah, his name is Mark.
Like Mark Urvanov, I'm presuming he fights out of Russia. I never met a Russian dude whose name was Mark. I'm just saying. Not to say that they don't exist.
And BoxRec has his birth name here, and it damn sure says Mark in Russian. So it's pretty weird.
All right.
Yep. You've never seen... Okay, so I will... I'm going to ping you, as they say, when Mark Urvanov's coming to the ring Saturday, and if you're awake and available, you can tune in, because I got to get you to watch Urvanov. He's good.
All right, what else do we have?
You didn't sound too enthused by
You
that.
said like 7:30 a.m. Eastern. Are you kidding me? I'm on the West Coast.
No. The main event won't go off until probably 1 Eastern at the earliest.
Oh, then I will most likely be sitting at my desk on Twitter or something.
Yeah, you just completely dismissed my comment. Just said, all right, let's move on to the next segment. I'm not going to watch Russian Canelo named Mark, all right? I got better.
Some dude named Mark Urvanov who calls himself Canelo. This sounds like a scam.
All right, well.
You know what this sounds like? It sounds like we were creating a boxing video game, and we had to like randomly generate fighters with the nickname and stuff. And like the random generator was like, oh, create a Russian guy. So it just grabbed a random Russian last name, but then auto-populated from everything else. And we wound up with Mark Canelo Urvanov.
Yeah. And these same developers know like 3 boxers. So they looked at him and said, holy shit, he's got red hair. Right. And
they only use nicknames of people who are active. So it's like, all right, well, this guy's Canelo. and then this guy, let's just pick somebody who we've talked about earlier. It would be like, all right, we have Fabio Maldonado, nicknamed Bronze Bomber. It's like, wait, what?
Oh, that's fair, man. That's fair. I got some other stuff to tell you.
All right, there's one of these that I'm definitely looking forward to hearing about.
I think I know what that is. So, and just so we've talked about this we've alluded to this a few times on the show, so I might as well just come out with it. So obviously we've got some show notes, to help guide us through, but I am so, I think I mentioned in a previous podcast, I can hardly remember what I did like an hour ago. So if I don't write down what I'm about to share with you, this whole thing would be a disaster. Plus, my OCD is a whole separate level from maybe other people you've met. So I literally can't walk out the door without writing down which leg to put in my pants first. So that's just part of how I'm built. So I think I know which one you're pointing to. So I'm going to talk about that one last. So, okay. So first of all, we have a pretty cool fight Saturday night. Pretty interesting. Colombian by the name of Robert Barrera, 22-3, versus an Argentine fighter who I think really highly of. He's only 22 years old. He's 12-0, named Kevin Luis Munoz. That'll be live on TYC Sports, or as the Argentines call it, Tech Sports, on Saturday night. And that box rec is linked for you. And I also will go in there and put a stream link here before we get along too much further. So you can click and watch that one if you want. That should be a really good fight. Munoz on the road. I don't know a lot about Barrera, but I think a lot of Munoz. And we may be talking about that as one of the top fights of the weekend when we're done. And then, so there's that. Also on the same show, someone who I talked about, I want to say first or second episode, is 24-year-old Colombian named Yoel Finol, 3-0. And amazingly, he's fighting someone named Luis Gerardo Castillo, 28-2, in a 9-round bout, something shout out to South America. You generally only see in South America, for the WBA, Fedable super flyweight title. And I mentioned Yoel Finol in the past, number one, because I think really highly of this kid's ceiling. Like, I think he's got world championship level talent, number one. Number two, I think, did I say Colombian? If I said Colombian, I apologize. Yoel Finol is
Venezuelan.
He may reside in, I was going to say he may reside in Colombia now, but he's Venezuelan. Number one is because I think a lot of the guy's talent. Number two, because he's got a fantastic mullet. So he just looks the part in the ring. But then number three, and this is just a really a fascinating nugget, he is the brother of the former wife. Maybe I'm laying this out weird, but his sister, that's an easier way to say it. His sister is the deceased wife of Edwin Valero, Venezuelan, 27-0 with 27 knockouts, that
killed his wife,
killed his wife and then killed himself, former world champion. So Valero's wife is Finol's sister, or was Finol's sister. So he is a really, really talented fighter, and he likes to bang. So that should be a hell of a fight. Really looking forward to that. And then we are back at the Mecca finally. Big Punch Arena Saturday, off box rec. It looked like we had potentially a handful of U.S. prospects on this show, not the least of which being 17-year-old Ashton Silva from California. But I don't think Silva made it through. I don't think he's going to be fighting on the show, but we're back at Big Punch Arena Saturday afternoon, and I always like to watch that. And then last but not least, on the boxing side, one more nugget to share is the one I think you're excited about, and I am too. 44-year-old Italian Emiliano Marsili, 39-0-1 versus Stefan Jamoy, who is 33-8-1 for the vacant IBO Mediterranean lightweight title. And this should be live on YouTube, and I'll have the link in there for you as well. Probably main event will probably go off kind of mid-afternoon in the East Coast of the U.S. And I love Marsili, number one, because the guy's 44 years old and seemingly been a lightweight forever. So how he was able to turn pro in 2003 as a lightweight, and now he's fighting at the same weight when he's 44 years old. And the guy looks like he's just cracked out he looks like a Greek god. He's got so much muscle, it's ridiculous. I also kind of think of him as the king of the 6-rounders. Whenever I watch him, he's fighting a 6-round fight, although he's been 12 rounds a ton of times. But why are you so excited?
I couldn't tell you a single one of Jamoy's fights, despite watching way too many. But I just can't remember who he's fought because they're just always kind of like background fights where nothing of note really happens in them. I remember watching Emiliano Marsili years ago at some like basically domestic level show. It was a really good fight with him and Derry Matthews. Marsili won the fight. And it's just always has like cracked me up that you got this dude, Emiliano Marsili. He's not bad. You know, he's like a slick fighter for the domestic level. And he's 44 years old. He's 39-0, and he's never, like, even when he was in position to challenge and be a mandatory for a world title, has just never been like, he's just been his whole career, yeah, that's okay. I just fight at this domestic level, and I'm okay being like the king of Italy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I don't know a lot about the background on his promotional situation and, you know, what fights had potentially been lined up for him to go to a different level. But as you mentioned, he's fought for and won some what we would call regional titles, right? Like international versions of WBA, WBC type titles. So, but yet doesn't look like, unless I'm missing it, that he's ever fought for a world title.
Maybe like 7 years ago, he became the mandatory, and he's just been taking step aside since then.
God bless him if he did. Actually, that Derry Matthews fight was the IBO world title. So I know in his mind, I'm sure he probably thinks has been a world champion. He won the EBU lightweight title, not world title, EBU title.
Yeah.
This guy's been in and around it.
So that guy's just always fascinated me.
Yep. Me too. I love him. So there's that. And then I'll just close with this. And I know we're not talking boxing. The only other combat sport that I pay attention to, it's bare knuckle BKFC 18 this weekend on pay-per-view. It's the heavyweight main event with their champion, Joey Beltran. And also, kind of interesting, former French fighter that may ring a bell. And shoot, his name is escaping me now. But he fought, his name looked familiar to me. And then when I dug into his box rec, I understood why, because he fought and defeated, right? Or did he lose? Juan Pablo Hernandez.
Juan Pablo Hernandez was undefeated until he came back, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think you're right. So he must have lost to Steve Aurelius. Is it Steve Aurelius? Yep, Steve Aurelius. French.
Hell of a name.
French heavyweight, now residing in Florida. But he had a pretty extensive boxing career, ended up being 21-5-1. And to your point, fought in 2011 and lost to Juan Pablo Hernandez at the cruiserweight limit. Got knocked out in the 7th round. But up to that point, he fought Albert Sosnowski, pretty familiar name, back in the early 2000s at just past the cruiserweight limit in the UK. So he's going to make his bare knuckle debut. I really like bare knuckle, so that should be fun. And plus, you can subscribe on their app, and you get the pay-per-view for like $4, and you can cancel anytime. I mean, it's really hard to beat.
That is cheaper than some of these other cards we've talked about.
Yeah, like I said, that really pissed me off and stressed me the hell out when I'm trying to watch as much as I can this past weekend, and it's, upwards of $300 just to watch it all. It's ridiculous. It's gotten to a point of insanity, quite frankly.
Oh boy. Well, with Tim about to lose his sanity, I think we could close it up here. Any final thoughts on the weekend?
No, I just did want to mention, and I know you mentioned it last show, is I tweeted out the other day a link to our Discord, and we're just kind of getting started in Discord. And when I did tweet it out, some people were kind enough to join us. And it's a pretty quiet place, Monday through Friday. But then hopefully when we're watching some of these, I don't want to say obscure, but like club level fights, we get a little more traffic and people talk about, watching the club level stuff. So it's a good place to come over and chat with us. So the link is in my bio on my social media and Instagram and Twitter. And we'd love to have you come join the discussion in Discord when we're watching some of this stuff. It'd be fun. So
come join
thanks to
the Tim Boxeo Nation and get in early while you can.
Well, you can. And we've got Angelo's B10 consulting group has armed me with some great ideas, and we have a ton of stuff on the horizon, some potentially in the very near future. So it'll be fun to do some additional things here around the club boxing scene, hopefully really soon.
Yeah, Tim is cornering this market. So if you think that you're about to come up in here and start your own podcast on Big Punch, not happening. Also, because Alejandro is our friend.
It's just like sales, man. Listen, people try to hide their sales secrets, right? People try to hide their secrets to whatever. And listen, man, it's not about the secrets. It's about the grind. So if you think you can outgrind me, dude, put a helmet on. Let's get after it.
And with that said, thank you so much for listening to the latest edition of the Tim Boxeo Show. And if you like this podcast, you want to help the podcast, share it or leave a rating and a review. Make sure they're 5-star. And for Tim Boxeo Discord, calendar, shop where you can buy t-shirts and anything else, you should go to Tim Boxeo's Twitter. Make sure you hit the follow button and you can get cool video clips like Saul Farah getting, Pedro Tabarez attempting to murder Saul Farah. But also in the bio, you can get links to all of the things that we just said and including more. I think you got a few other links there that I don't even remember what they are. But thank you guys so much. Tim, any final words?
No, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks a lot, Angela. Always appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you guys for listening. We will be back next week.